My name is Indira. I am 31 years old. When my husband asked me for a divorce, the first thing I noticed was not his voice, not his eyes, not even the cold distance between us, but the strange calm that settled inside me, a silence so heavy it felt like it had been waiting for this exact moment. We were sitting across from each other at the dining table. We had picked together years ago, the same table where we once laughed about baby names and vacation plans, yet that evening his words landed like a verdict already decided. He did not look nervous or conflicted. He looked prepared, almost relieved, as though he had rehearsed the scene in his mind many times. "I think we both know this isn't working anymore," he said, carefully measured, like someone delivering a corporate speech instead of dismantling a marriage. I remember staring at him, searching for some crack in his expression, some hint that this was painful for him too, but there was none. What he did not know, what he could not even imagine, was that just 3 months earlier, my father had passed away, leaving behind not only grief, but a fortune I had told no one about. When my husband asked for a divorce, I stayed silent about the $72 million I inherited from my late father. Thank goodness I did, and because days later, he showed up. With a lawyer at my door. That sentence would later replay, in my head like a prophecy fulfilled. But at that table, in that moment, it was still a secret coiled tightly within me. I had spent weeks drowning in paperwork, legal meetings and quiet tears, swearing every professional involved to confidentiality. Not because I distrusted my husband then, but because I wanted time to breathe, to process, to understand the magnitude of losing a parent before speaking, about money that suddenly changed everything. And now, as he spoke about separation and needing different things, I realized my silence had unknowingly protected me. He talked about growing apart, about wanting freedom, about how he deserved happiness. Phrases that sounded eerily polished, as if borrowed from a self-help book or whispered into his ear by someone else. I nodded occasionally, not in agreement, but in disbelief, feeling as though I were watching a stranger wear my husband's face. There was no mention of counseling, no attempt to fight, no visible sadness, only an urgency to formalize the end. That urgency unsettled me. People do not usually abandon a life so quickly without believing something better awaits them. Still, I said nothing. Not about the inheritance, not about the sleepless nights after my father's funeral, not about the storm of emotions raging beneath my composed exterior. Silence became my shield. He mistook it for weakness. Perhaps guilt, perhaps resignation, but it was neither. It was instinct. In the days that followed, his behavior grew oddly detached yet energetic, like a man already stepping into a new chapter. He took long phone calls in another room, smiled at messages he quickly hid, and spoke of practicalities with chilling efficiency, assets, timelines, living arrangements. Not once did he ask how I was coping with my father's death. Not once. That omission cut deeper than the divorce itself. Grief reveals character, and his absence within mine told me more than any confession could. A part of me wanted to confront him, to demand honesty, to ask if there was someone else. But another part, quieter, sharper, chose patience. I observed. I listened. I remembered small details that suddenly seemed significant. His sudden interest in my finances months earlier, casual questions about my father's estate, his subtle frustration whenever I deflected. Had he known? Had he suspected? Or had he simply grown tired of a wife he believed brought him no strategic advantage? The questions churned endlessly, yet I kept my composure. I signed nothing. I revealed nothing. I waited. Because beneath the heartbreak, beneath the humiliation, beneath the hollow ache of watching my marriage collapse, a new awareness was forming. One that whispered that the story was not ending here, that something crucial was still hidden behind his haste, his confidence, his certainty, and deep down I sensed that my silence, the very thing he interpreted as defeat, was about to become the most powerful decision of my life. Days passed after that conversation, yet the air inside the house felt charged, like the uneasy stillness before a storm. My husband moved with a confidence that no longer matched the gravity of what he had asked for. He was lighter, almost buoyant, as if the divorce were not a loss, but an escape hatch he had longed to open. I remained quiet, watching, sensing that something invisible was unfolding beyond my view. When my husband asked for a divorce, I stayed silent about the $72 million I inherited from my late father. Thank goodness I did, and because days later, he showed up. With a lawyer at my door. That truth arrived not as drama, but as a knock. Firm, deliberate, unmistakable. I remember the exact moment. It was late afternoon. The kind of golden hour where everything looks deceptively peaceful. I opened the door expecting a delivery or perhaps a neighbor. Instead, there he stood, my husband. The man who had already emotionally vacated our life, accompanied by a sharply dressed stranger, holding a leather folder. The shock was not just his presence but his expression. Calculated, almost triumphant, stripped of any warmth or hesitation. There was no awkwardness, no trace of the man who once kissed me goodbye each morning. Only purpose, only intent. "We need to discuss some financial matters," he said, his tone eerily steady. The lawyer nodded politely, professionally, as though this were a routine appointment rather than an ambush at my doorstep. In that instant, everything aligned with chilling clarity. The urgency, the rehearsed phrases, the strange detachment, none of it had been accidental. He believed there was something to claim. He believed there was money. My silence had not merely delayed a conversation. It had exposed a motive. I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. Yet beneath it was something stronger than fear. Certainty. They stepped inside, carrying with them the energy of people who expected advantage. The lawyer spoke in carefully structured sentences about equitable distribution, marital assets, and full financial transparency. The words were technical, but the implication was unmistakable. They were fishing. They were certain there was a fortune to divide. My husband avoided my eyes, focusing instead on the performance of legitimacy unfolding beside him. It was then I understood the depth of the betrayal. This was not a man seeking closure or fairness. This was a man who believed he had timed his exit perfectly, who assumed I would crumble, who expected access to wealth he had never earned and grief he had never shared. The irony was almost unbearable. Had I revealed the inheritance months earlier, had I celebrated it openly, had I trusted without caution, this moment might have destroyed me. But silence, that instinctive, accidental silence, had rewritten the balance of power. I listened calmly as they outlined expectations, their confidence slowly colliding with my stillness. When I finally spoke, the room shifted. I explained with deliberate clarity that the inheritance was legally protected, structured long before my marriage, sealed by mechanisms they clearly had not anticipated. I watched confusion flicker across the lawyer's face, then discomfort, then the subtle professional retreat of someone recognizing a failed strategy. My husband's composure fractured almost imperceptibly, the certainty draining from his posture. For the first time since he had asked for a divorce, he looked uncertain, human. But the moment brought no satisfaction, only a profound, sobering clarity. Love does not vanish overnight without reason. Loyalty does not erode without incentive. His return with legal reinforcement was not coincidence. It was confirmation. Confirmation that my silence had saved me from a far greater devastation than divorce itself. They left with forced politeness, their earlier confidence replaced by tight, brittle courtesy. The door closed, and with it, the last illusion I had carried about the man I married. Yet standing alone in that quiet house, I did not feel broken. I felt awakened. Strength, I realized, is often mistaken for stillness. Silence is not surrender. And sometimes, the most life-altering victories occur not through confrontation but restraint. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that patience and awareness can protect you in ways emotion cannot, take a moment to stand with this journey. Subscribe to True Revenge Glory for more stories that reveal the hidden truths behind trust, betrayal, and the quiet power of choosing not to speak too soon.